Rayu is young, unemployed and in a funk, though he hasn't always been this way. He recalls suddenly feeling the urge to retreat within himself like a cocoon. Because in his mind, after a cocoon comes a butterfly. He looks around at the people, happy in their social circles, on their way to or from work, and realizes that until recently he was just like them. Now he's on the outside, looking in at them. Rayu wanders into a bar called Bar Houdini, bewildered by the establishment, when he bumps into its master, the new owner of the location. The spot used to be a diner run by Mr. and Mrs. Tanaka, and finding out that they're gone, Rayu turns to leave when the master suddenly realizes who he is. The master gives Rayu an old leather suitcase that Mr. Tanaka left him to deliver. The master informs him that apparently, 100 days ago, Rayu left the suitcase to Mr. Tanaka for safekeeping, telling him he'd return in exactly 100 days to claim it, while also warning that he may not remember having left the case at all. The master wonders if perhaps Rayu wanted to become a magician. After all, the theme of the bar is magic. He advises Rayu that soon, famous magicians will start frequenting this bar. Rayu returns home and opens the case to find a collection of items that seem to be related to his girlfriend, Yuri. While most of the objects are familiar, like her toothbrush, the photo that he gave her, the disposable camera that they took pictures on, some of the items are completely foreign to him, like the giant lollipop, photos of somewhere that clearly isn't Tokyo, and an unknown key. As he takes out Yuri's journal, he contemplates how his cocooning began when he was informed of Yuri's passing 100 days ago, and decides that it's time to become a butterfly. He gets a haircut, takes a proper bath, and starts cleaning out his apartment. It's still a shock to him how suddenly she disappeared. There were no calls, no texts, like she'd vanished from the earth entirely. Then one day, he got a call from Yuri's phone number, informing him Yuri was gone and the funeral had already been held. Rayu visits Yuri's mother, Kenny Kawaguchi, who offers him her sincerest apologies for not letting him know about her passing sooner. Yuri never told Kenny she had a boyfriend. Kenny asks Rayu if he knows why Yuri felt the need to take her own life, but Rayu doesn't think he can explain because in his mind, Yuri hasn't passed, just disappeared. He recalls a time where he and Yuri lay in bed, and despite her lack of tears, she told him she was crying but she didn't know why. Yuri expressed to him that she couldn't cry or laugh when she wanted to, that she felt as though her emotions were selfish. She'd said to him that she vaguely knew that she was not long for this world, that soon, she would disappear. We see a flashback of when the couple went to Tokyo Tower. Yuri tells Rayu that she knows that somewhere in Japan, there exists a woman who looks exactly like her, who's smarter, happier, and more beautiful than she is. Yuri wonders if she passes on, if she could become that woman, expressing that she feels as though her life is fake. She tells Rayu that if she were to disappear, he should find that woman. She's somewhere watching drift ice in Hokkaido. Rayu can almost see the woman on an icebreaker boat in his mind's eye. Yuri wants to see out of that woman's eyes, and she tells Rayu not to look for her if she disappears. She won't look for him either, but she knows they'll meet again. Kenny is grateful that Yuri had a boyfriend, and that she wasn't alone. With a deep bow, she thanks Rayu for being there for her daughter. Rayu visits Bar Houdini again, looking round for the master, but finds the bar is full of young women and men practicing very basic magic tricks. He turns to leave when he bumps into a mysterious figure, Mr. Kita, who wonders if Rayu is disappointed at what he's found. Kita pulls out a box, showing Rayu that it's empty, and claims that he'll fill the box with something from Rayu's house as he gently closes it. He tells Rayu to shut his eyes for a moment, then hands him the box, instructing him to open it when he gets home. Rayu opens up the box, and is shocked to see the lollipop that was in the case of Yuri's things in the box. He shows up at Bar Houdini again the next day, asking for Mr. Kita. He wants to become his pupil. However, the master informs him that Mr. Kita doesn't take on disciples, and he rarely shows up at the bar anyway. The master informs him not to worry though, as he knows many great magic teachers. Speaking of teachers, the master pops his head out to the patrons of the magic club, informing them their teacher will be arriving soon. After disappearing behind the curtain, what appears to be the master resurfaces, dressed and acting completely differently, and introduces himself to the class as James Katsuragi, master magician. Rayu didn't realize the bar master was the teacher, but James admonishes Rayu for this statement, making it clear that he is not the owner but in fact, his doppelganger. James claims that he and the owner are the same, but they're different people, and he hates being compared to him. James flamboyantly leads the class into their lesson by telling them that he'll teach them how to create the ultimate miracle from their very own hands, magic. Passing a candy shop, Rayu can't help but try his own hand at magic, wondering how Kita-san pulled his trick off. Rayu takes the photos from the disposable camera to be developed, and is swarmed by an odd nostalgia, seeing photos of Yuri again. He remembers them walking through the rain, her smile, and the moment she took the camera from him, taking the photo that lies in his hands now. There are traces of her in everything for him, and he uses these remnants as motivation while he learns magic. He gets a job again, and he entertains his co-workers with the tricks he teaches himself. He learns quickly, easily performing card tricks and sleights of hand in no time. He even entertains the old men at the hot springs with impossible feats, and more than impresses the crowd at Bar Houdini. While at the bar, he and the master listen to a news report about a famous magician, Rayu Murayama, who's gone missing after attempting a dangerous trick where he was locked in a box and sunk in the sea. Unfortunately, the trick didn't go as planned, and Rayu never returned. Rayu notices that the magician looks an awful lot like him, and the owner suggests that perhaps Rayu Murayama is Ryu's doppelganger. Rayu scoffs at that, thinking the owner was just one person playing two roles, but he insists to Rayu that doppelgangers truly exist. The owner explains that multiple cultures believe in the concept. In Japanese records, it's referred to as the shadow disease, and that even famous people such as Goethe and Edgar Allan Poe had doppelgangers. When one doppelganger finds out about the other, they're tormented by severe depression, extremely suicidal thoughts, and eventually take their own lives. Rayu laughs at that, suggesting that would mean that either the master or James would perish, but the owner assures him that he's already surpassed such issues with his doppelganger, while suggesting that perhaps Rayu was Ryu's doppelganger, and he discovered that, leading him to want to disappear. That night, Rayu can't help but look up photos of Rayu and compare them to one of himself, where he simply draws in Ryu's facial hair on his own face. To his astonishment, the two are identical. He recalls what Yuri said about someone who looked just like her in Hokkaido, and considering the possibility of finding her double, decides to take a trip there. He uses the photos found from Yuri's box to make sense of the new town. They lead him to a house, where he finds out what the key in Yuri's box was for. It opens the door. He enters the house full of mirrors, lights and magic paraphernalia, and looks around. There's a drawing of Rayu hung by the window, and he discovers his notebook as well, where he finds handwritten plans for the magician's daring trick, along with a map. Rayu boards a train to Abashiri that, due to an accident, stops at Kitami Station for an hour to make repairs. A woman on the train opposite him, who looks exactly like Yuri, spots him and is visibly surprised. Rayu gets off the train to waste time, walking right past the girl's window, and she gets off the train to follow him. Rayu wanders through the festival just outside the station when a little girl bumps into him, dropping her teddy bear, and he performs a magic trick where he makes the bear stand up and walk over to her, to much amazement from the crowd that's gathered around them. The girl sees this trick and can't believe her eyes. As the crowd is distracted by the festival, the two make eye contact and the girl bursts into tears, yelling at Rayu, assuming he's the great magician Rayu. She accosts him about where he's been, what he's been planning, and if the escape trick was just an excuse for him to get away from her. But Rayu is speechless and utterly dumbfounded. She's the spitting image of Yuri. Without thinking, Rayu apologizes to her and lies that he doesn't remember anything. The girl drags him onto a train and starts interrogating him on where he's been and what he remembers last, but looking at his confused face, she calms down, telling him he didn't need to explain, she was just glad to have him back. She doesn't care where he's been, as long as he doesn't leave again. She wants to take him to watch drift ice like they'd promised. And there, she'll tell him the story of how she and Rayu met, and they could just make new memories. Rayu doesn't mind this deceit. She'll be Yuri for him, and he'll be Rayu for her. Yuri's lookalike, Aya, explains that she met Rayu in college. She and her friends were more excited for his performance than their own. In a flashback, Aya dances on stage with her girl group, and after their bows, returning backstage, the girls quickly get dressed so they can join the audience for Ryu's magic show. Aya is chosen as a volunteer for Ryu's next trick, where he claims he will make her disappear. He raises his cape, walking circles around her, and with a flourish, he hides her behind his arm. When he slowly lowers it, Aya finds that she's still in the auditorium and can hear the crowd, but there's no one there. She looks around, confused, when a woman that looks just like her appears in the aisles. Ryu's caped arm covers her face again, and suddenly she's back in the real auditorium, left utterly bewildered. She recalls when they watched the Norbessa Ferris wheel, and she confided in Rayu that she was fascinated with the supernatural, and all things that couldn't be explained by science. Rayu tells her that the happiest moment during a supernatural incident is the moment love begins, because love is the most magical thing of all, and he confesses he fell for her magic the moment he saw her. Rayu then began planning his dangerous trick, a trick Aya wasn't happy about. She claimed to Rayu she had a bad feeling about the trick, though he assured her there was no way he'd stay in the ocean while she was on land. Aya childishly gets jealous of the sea, nearly walking straight in, but he pulls her back from the waves, calming her with a passionate kiss. The night of his trick, Rayu creates a full spectacle of it, with assistants helping chain him in front of the audience. Aya runs up on stage, and Rayu takes the moment to announce to the crowd that she is the woman he loves most in the world. Before his hands are chained, he gives Aya his father's watch, asking her to hold onto it until his return, since it isn't waterproof, and the couple share a tender kiss goodbye, to much applause from the audience. Ryu's arms are shackled, he's locked into the box, and the box is slowly lowered into the sea. Aya's breaths quicken anxiously as the saw begins cutting the wire that holds the box. The screen that shows the underwater footage and Ryu's heart monitor suddenly goes black, and Aya is overtaken with tears, begging for the nightmarish situation to stop. Authorities search the waters for Rayu, but he's never found. While listening to her story, Rayu feels like it's happened to him, and wonders if she truly thinks he's Rayu. Aya walks him to the spot where Rayu disappeared, trying to jog a memory Rayu doesn't have. Then they take a ride on an icebreaker boat, where Aya kisses Rayu on the deck, trying to remind him of the time Rayu kissed her just the same way in that same spot. She mentions there was a man who took a picture of them, and as if on cue, said man appears, handing the photo he took of Rayu and Aya to Rayu as a gift. Aya smiles fondly at the photo, remembering that Rayu once told her he liked cold lips, an excuse she uses to kiss Rayu again. When they return to the city, Aya takes off running, dragging a confused Rayu behind her, while quickly reminding him of her brother, Ryoma Kawaguchi, who's in a facility for autism, and who she's late seeing today. The nurses at the facility complain to Aya about her brother's perverse behavior, informing her that he keeps flipping up the nurses' skirts and setting up cameras in the women's bathrooms. Aya placates him by lying that Rayu can set up a meeting for him with Ayase Haruka, a famous actress who's currently filming a drama at Sapporo Tower, and that she's signed Ryoma up to be an extra. Aya has Rayu distract all the nurses with magic tricks, while she sneaks Ryoma out of the facility. She pushes Ryoma's chair in circles, while he argues with someone on the phone about an apparent change in the filming location. When Aya takes the phone from him, she notes that the person hung up, and Ryoma reveals that no one answered to begin with. The couple take Ryoma to Ryu's house, where he sits on the couch scribbling in a notebook, before suddenly interrogating Rayu about whether he's going to have sex with his sister. Aya's aghast, but Rayu redirects Ryoma's attention by asking him to calculate a huge multiplication sum. But he doesn't bite at first, discouraged by the fact that Rayu has a calculator in his hand. Rayu challenges him with which day of the week the 3rd of April 1986 was, and that gets him, frustrating Ryoma when he answers it wrong. Ryoma hands Rayu the drawing he was doing, a sketch identical to the one of Rayu on the wall. Rayu reappears to the nurses 4 hours later, distracting them with another set of tricks while Aya returns her brother. The couple head back to Ryu's place, where, while making out, Rayu notices Yuri's tattoo on Aya, in the exact same place. He knows that he's Rayu to her, but he wonders, is this girl really Yuri? Aya wakes the next morning to an empty bed and an empty house. Rayu has vanished again, leaving her wondering if it was a dream. When she goes downstairs to look for him, she finds that he's left his key, along with photos of him and Yuri's journal. Aya picks up the journal, curiously thumbing through the pages when she's overcome with tears. Rayu visits Ms. Kawaguchi and confesses he saw Yuri and Hokkaido. Kani bows deeply, repeatedly apologizing, and reveals that she's not her mother, but in fact her aunt, and her only relative. She explains that Aya had severe depression after she lost her fiancé in Sapporo, and so Kani brought her to Tokyo. When her depression was getting better, she met Rayu and dated him under the name of Yuri, trying to forget she was ever Aya. Eventually, her guilt grew stronger as she contemplated whether her ex was still alive in Sapporo, and her thoughts turned to self-harm. Kani felt she'd no choice but to send her back to Sapporo, but Rayu doesn't understand why faking her demise was necessary. Kani explains that when Aya returned to Sapporo, all her memories of her time in Tokyo vanished. She forgot everything, so the girl once called Yuri is now as good as gone. Rayu can't control his tears on the bus home, unable to reconcile the feeling of simply being a replacement for another man, a placebo for Aya's loss. In the wake of his heartbreak, Rayu commits himself to perfecting his magic skills, attending shows and taking notes, training his body, mind and reflexes, and practicing new tricks. Eventually he performs his own show and stuns large audiences, winning him first prize at the World Magic Competition. After winning the competition, Rayu visits Bar Houdini, where he runs into Mr. Kita again. He thanks him, revealing to Mr. Kita that it was his trick that motivated Rayu to start magic in the first place, and once again asks to be taken under his tutelage. But Mr. Kita informs him that he's no longer a magician. Kita thinks Rayu will become a great magician, but advises that he cannot rely solely on technique. Rayu thinks that if he feels that way then he should teach him real magic, not just the parlor tricks he's currently doing. Kita explains that real magic can't be taught, using the example of Christ, and poses the question, did Jesus really feed all those people, or did he just give them the illusion they were full? Rayu confesses that he still doesn't know how Kita managed to pull off the previous trick with the lollipop, but Kita offers the rebuttal that if it could be explained, then it would no longer be magic. Before disappearing, Kita congratulates Rayu on winning the competition. Ryu's popularity grows as a magician until he becomes famous, even publishing a book on magic and often making appearances on TV shows. The master informs Rayu he has a visitor at the bar one day, and it's Ryoma. He angrily throws a fit at Rayu, showing him a picture of Aya, who's now been committed to a mental hospital for dissociative identity disorder. Ryoma blames him for confusing her, and then disappearing. After the master wheels Ryoma out, Rayu explains to him that he left some of Yuri's belongings there for her, not intending to harm her, but hoping it would reveal to her the truth about who he is. Rayu flies to Hokkaido, where he speaks to Aya's doctor, who explains everything about her history. Aya became severely depressed after Ryu's demise, and when she met Rayu in Tokyo, a new personality named Yuri was born, because Aya can't accept that she loves anyone but Rayu. She uses her new identity, Yuri, to love Rayu, but both the identities exist together. Aya believed her two identities were doppelgangers, and thus one of them needed to perish. Yuri's identity sacrificed itself so that Aya could come back, but Aya wasn't fully mentally recovered, so when she met Rayu and Hokkaido, she was convinced he was Rayu. After Rayu left Yuri's belongings with Aya, pieces of Yuri's identity began resurfacing, and Aya eventually became so confused that she eventually attempted. He reveals that Aya lost her parents in a fire at an early age, and theorizes that Aya, instead of overcoming extreme hardship, forced those hardships onto a new identity. The doctor admits he's not sure which identity she is now, thinking that whether she reacts to him as Rayu or Rayu will give them an indicator. When Rayu sits in front of her, she sullenly cries to him that she can't be happy, she can't feel her. Yuri says that the only way to happiness is for Aya to live, blaming and cursing herself for existing. Rayu silently wipes her tears, though his cheeks are stained with his own, simply relieved to see his Yuri again. She says she wants to see drift ice, and Rayu briefly wonders which of them spoke, Aya or Yuri. A random nurse interrupts them, noting that Ryu's a famous magician, and asks for his autograph later, which makes her look at him with a curious smile. Rayu sponsors and sets up a small magic show for the patients at the hospital, and during his performance he calls Aya up to the stage as a volunteer. He puts a mask on her, then circles her with his cape out, and with a grand gesture, he makes the two of them disappear. A pair of body doubles appear on the opposite end of the stage, stunning the crowd, while the real pair switch outfits and sneak out of the hospital in an ambulance. The runaways try to curb their excitement as they escape by train, falling asleep on each other's shoulders along the ride. The train stops in Kitami, and Aya remarks that this always happens. Authorities claim there's an accident, or they're stopping for repairs, but she gets the feeling it's just a tactic to divert more people to the annual festival. Suddenly she switches back to Yuri, excitedly calling him Rayu for a moment, before she decides to join the festival. As the two wander round, Yuri wonders if she's having deja vu, but Rayu confirms it's not, it's a scene from memory. Yuri admits she's heard well enough from the doctor about the two people living in her head, and figures everyone has someone living inside them in some way. Turning to Rayu, she cheekily asks him who she should be. Rayu and Aya travel through the town on a drastic super makeover. They get new hairstyles, accessories, and even completely change their wardrobes to styles opposite from what they'd usually wear. While strutting about, dressed as eclectic eccentrics, they're noticed by 3 policemen who are quite frankly baffled by their disguises, as they're still perfectly recognizable. The nice policeman kindly asks that they return to the hospital, as the girl is still patient. Aya wonders why Rayu can't just make their interrogators vanish or something, and he flippantly admits he'll just need more preparation. The group are halted in their tracks when she spots an ice cream shop, which Rayu mentions supposedly makes their ice cream from real glaciers. Like children, all of them are in awe, and Aya proposes to show them a magic trick, one where they all shut their eyes and let the couple have some glacier ice cream in peace. While eating ice cream, she asks Rayu which one she looks like, Aya or Yuri, but to him it doesn't matter. Aya still prods as to what Yuri was like. Rayu's throat is tight when he admits that Yuri's gone. And so is Aya, and from that moment on, he dubs her Mathilda. She wishes it could work that way. She doesn't understand what she's supposed to do now, because the person she thinks is Rayu calls himself Rayu. Frustrated, Rayu tosses his ice cream. He can't take any more of this. The whole point of them getting dressed up like this was for them to escape the ensnaring identities of Rayu and Aya, Rayu and Yuri. He's losing his sense of identity now, and it makes the situation just as hard for him. He takes the disguise off and begs her to look at him. He doesn't know what Rayu was like, but she loved him and he has the same face, so why can't she just love him the same? She admits she enjoyed getting dressed up and pretending to be someone else for a moment, but eventually time will pass, her hair will grow, and she fears she'll get confused again. Rayu holds her, pleading to stay in each other's arms forever, but she lets go, pulling herself from his side and surrendering herself to the police. Just as she's about to be carted away, Rayu tells her that if her hair grows, she can just cut it again, and if she gets confused again, she need only remember the happy times. He confesses he knows they'll meet again, declaring that the next time they meet, they'll be Mathilda and Leon. As they travel on their separate ways, the pair look up and can see each other from their respective windows, just as they did when they saw each other for the first time on the train. Rayu scribbles a goodbye on the window and magically sends his goodbye message to Mathilda. Eventually, Rayu hears that she's released from the hospital, even though the doctor said there could be a recurrence at any time. He resolves to become Rayu and not Rayu, seeing as that's likely what she wants. The owner of the bar mentions to a patron the story of how Goethe and Edgar Allan Poe have doppelgangers, revealing that the reason neither of them disappeared is because they somehow managed to synchronize their souls with their doppelgangers. But he, of course, doesn't explain how they did it. Aya still visits Ryu's house, keeping it clean for the day of his return. Rayu lets himself in after she's gone, checking the back of the mirror, where he finds Ryu's handwritten notebook. While thumbing through the book, he finds a drawing with an inscription in it which helps Rayu realize that, during his trick, Rayu got the key through Aya's kiss, Similar to Houdini, she was, quite literally, the key to his escape. Another inscription reads, "I will wait for my other self," who Rayu realizes is him. Rayu curses, hating the fact that Rayu seemed to be 3 steps ahead of him. It's like he was always in his shadow. In Ryu's notebook was a perfectly planned escape magic trick, and yet he disappeared. Rayu finds that Rayu purposefully chose that location because the water suddenly gets deep. Deciphering Ryu's wishes, Rayu decides to go see him, and makes preparations to recreate Ryu's infamous trick, though he wonders, who is he supposed to get his key from? News of Ryu's recreation is broadcasted on TV, and on the day, Aya receives a delivery with the key to release Rayu. Aya stands in the train station, about to approach the ticket counter, but she hesitates. She promised herself she wouldn't go see him, as she felt as though that isn't leaving things up to fate. She turns to leave, and bumps into an old man, the owner of Bar Houdini, who notices that she was about to buy a ticket to a bashiri. He explains that he is on his way there to pray for the safe delivery of his baby, but he was just informed that a healthy baby girl has been born, so he no longer needs his ticket. Aya smiles, accepting it gratefully and offering her congratulations before running off to the train. The gathered crowd welcome Rayu to the stage with a boisterous round of applause, and similar to Ryu's trick, a grand spectacle is made out of chaining him up on stage. Leon is about to be lowered into the box when Mathilda comes running up to the stage, desperately calling his name. She's lifted up to reach him, where she delivers her life-saving kiss. Ryu's locked into the box, and even as they lift and plunge him into the ocean, he never takes his eyes off her. He takes a final breath as he's lowered into the water, the line is cut, and the monitors cut off as he sinks, just the same as in Ryu's trick. Rayu makes quick work of his chains, unlocking the box with the key hidden in his mouth. As he escapes, he makes his way over to Ryu's box, looking for some way to free him, but it's impossible. Rayu quickly returns to the surface, where rescue teams victoriously lift him out of the water to rowdy applause from the audience. Mathilda runs to the stage, tearfully hugging Leon, grateful to have him back. She clips Ryu's father's watch onto his wrist. The master delivers a recording left by Rayu for Rayu. In it, Rayu tells Rayu he knew of him for a while, and knew that he'd come. One day, Ryu's environment became visible to Rayu. It felt like déjà vu. He could see Ryu's future, and knew that he and Aya would fall in love, but in his déjà vu, he couldn't see his own future, only Rayu and Aya. That was when he knew he would be the one to disappear. Rayu believed that if Rayu would love everything that he possessed, then he would gladly. So he threw himself away to become Rayu. He asks Rayu to keep his soul open, so that from now on, he can exist in Ryu's mind and body, and asks him to love everything he did, including Aya. He says to Rayu that from now on, he will exist between him and Aya as the emotion of love. In this way, he's now become one with Rayu. When Rayu finished making the tape, the master mentioned to him, as he did to many, that there is a way for both doppelgangers to exist, offering to tell him the secret. Rayu, however, declined, doubting that it would work if both doppelgangers loved the same woman. Rayu claimed that he would rather live in Aya's heart. As the recording ends, Rayu wipes tears from his cheek. He now understands the intense depth of Ryu's sacrifice, and not only feels his pain, but all his resignation and love. Rayu is grateful to him, and as he stares out towards the sea, feeling the past tears that Rayu once shed in that very spot, he can feel the synchronicity of their souls. Rayu dries his eyes as Aya joins him, comforting him with a smile. She looks out at the horizon with him, and her jaw drops as waves of drift ice start creeping over the horizon. She looks at Rayu, excitedly wondering how he did it. Through a sniffle and a small smile, he confesses it's magic, magic made by God.